The 2024 Europa Conference League is finally coming to an end, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you guys my predictions on the final match between Olympiacos and Fiorentina. This Conference League has been very interesting, where we have seen a lot of very strong teams get knocked out a little bit earlier than expected, and now we have finally reached the final match between Olympiacos and Fiorentina. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about both of these teams' seasons individually in their domestic leagues, but also how they've been performing in the Conference League. And finally, I'm going to be giving you guys my predictions on which team I think will win the Europa Conference League for 2024. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. Obviously, I will be talking about both of these teams' seasons so far, and starting off with Olympiacos, they have had a pretty successful season this year. Obviously, it hasn't been their most successful because they're not the champions of the Greek Super League, as they are currently sitting in third place. But I would still consider this a very successful season for them. Obviously, throughout history, Olympiacos are the most decorated Greek team, as they have won the Greek Super League 47 times, and they are obviously the team that has won the title the most. They have also won the Greek Cup another 28 times, and in terms of domestic trophies, they are very good. But in terms of European trophies, they have never won a European competition. Like I already said, they currently sit third place in the Greek Super League, which obviously isn't as good as they would have liked, because realistically they would have been trying to go for the title, but it still is a very successful season. 18 wins, 3 draws, and only 5 losses. And again, it's not been their best season, but still very successful, and now they do have the chance to win their first European trophy in the club's history. In terms of how they've been playing in Europe this season, obviously Olympiacos did start the season in the Europa League, but in the group stages they did finish in third place behind West Ham and Freiburg, and sadly this did mean that they were demoted into the Conference League. In the Conference League, they did obviously start their campaign in the Conference League playoffs, otherwise known as the round of 32, where they were versing against Ferencváros. And this was always going to be a very tough match because Ferencváros are a very strong Hungarian team. But in both legs, they ended up winning 1-0 by 2 goals from El Kabi, and they did advance into the round of 16. In the round of 16, Olympiacos were coming up against Maccabi Tel Aviv, and Olympiacos were definitely the favorites in this matchup. But in their first game, where they were playing at home, they ended up losing 4-1, and this was a huge upset. Many people thought that this was the end of Olympiacos' European run, as they were down by 3 goals on aggregate. But in the second leg, where they were playing away, they won that game 6-1, winning 7-5 on aggregate, and obviously advancing them into the quarterfinals. In the quarterfinals, they were coming up against Fenerbahce, which was obviously a very tough game. There's a big rivalry between those two clubs, and it was very intense. Olympiacos did win the first game at home 3-2, but in the second leg, they really struggled, and they ended up losing on full time 1-0. The game ended up going into penalties, where they did obviously win to advance to the semifinals. But this was where things were going to get really tough, as Olympiacos were coming up against Aston Villa, who were the favorites to win this whole competition. Most people had Aston Villa fairly comfortably beating Olympiacos, as Aston Villa currently sit 4th place in the Premier League. They're one of the best Premier League teams, and obviously the Premier League is the strongest league in the world. So most Premier League fans and most football fans around the world probably thought that Aston Villa would pretty comfortably beat Olympiacos. But in the first leg, which was being played at Villa Park, Olympiacos surprisingly beat Aston Villa 4-2 with a hat-trick by El Kabi. And going into the second leg, they were very confident. Obviously, in the second leg, Olympiacos were playing at home, they had the advantage, and they did end up beating Aston Villa 2-0 for a total of 6-2 on aggregate, a total of 5 goals from El Kabi to advance Olympiacos into the final match, where they would be coming up against Fiorentina. Moving into Fiorentina, throughout history, they have been a very successful Italian club. Obviously nowhere near the levels of Milan or Inter or Juve, but they have still been a fairly successful club, where they have won the Supercoppa 1 time, they have won the Coppa Italia 6 times, and they have also won the Scudetto 2 times as well. Most of Fiorentina's success came in the mid and late 1900s, but in recent years, we have really seen them start to perform much better than where they were in the last 10 or 15 years. Their manager Vincenzo Italiano has done great things for the club since joining about 3 years ago, and he has taken them to multiple semi-finals, a final, and no, they haven't really won anything, but I think within years to come, he could possibly be the man to take them to their first trophy in around 20 years. In the Serie A, Fiorentina do currently sit in 8th place, which doesn't look particularly good, but this season they have been a little bit inconsistent, where we have seen them beat some of the best teams in Serie A, but we have also seen them play very, very poorly against some of the worst teams. So it really depends which Fiorentina you get on the day, because if they play good, then they can beat some of the best teams in the world. If we look at Fiorentina's performances so far in the Conference League, they have been doing pretty well. Going back into the group stages, they were actually in a pretty tough group with the likes of Ferencváros and Genk in their group, but they still ended up finishing first place, finishing with 0 losses on the board. Obviously, this did allow them to completely skip through the round of 32, and going into the round of 16, they were coming up against Maccabi Haifa, who, similar to Maccabi Tel Aviv, are a very underrated team, and if they play good, they can definitely get an upset, and against Fiorentina, they did play pretty well. In the first game, where Fiorentina were playing away, they ended up winning the game 4-3, coming back twice in the game and scoring a 95th minute winner to obviously go into the second leg much more confident with that lead by 1 goal. In the second leg, Fiorentina defended very well. It ended in a 1-1 draw at home, and obviously this did mean that they will advance into the quarterfinals. In the quarterfinals, Fiorentina were coming up against Victoria Pilsen, who are a good team, but most people definitely expected that Fiorentina would win. But in the first leg, where they were playing away, they did not play good, and the game ended in a 0-0 draw. And even in the second leg, it was a complete demolition by Fiorentina, and they had over 50 total shots across both legs. But it took them until extra time to score the 2 goals that would put them up on aggregate to advance into the semi-finals. Fiorentina are one of those teams where even if they play good, they can dominate possession, but sometimes they struggle with putting away goals. And if they do this in this final game, it could prove to be a real difficulty for Fiorentina. In the semi-finals, they were coming up against Club Brugge, and in the first game, they were playing at home, they had the advantage, and they did end up winning 3-2. And again, in the second leg, going to Belgium, they ended up drawing the game 1-1. Club Brugge definitely had a few chances where they could have took advantage and brought the game into extra time and possibly even into penalties, but again, Fiorentina defensively have been very, very good this season, and they defended again very well in this game to put them in the final match where they will be coming up against Olympiacos. And now we have reached the final match where Olympiacos will be facing up against Fiorentina, and this, in my opinion, will be a very, very close match. Obviously, Olympiacos have had a very good season. Yes, they didn't finish at the top of the Greek Super League, but even finishing in 3rd place is still very good. But one thing that we have learned is that Olympiacos are a very consistent team, and when they are down or when they're losing, they don't drop their heads, but they keep going, and that's why we have seen them come back so many times in the UEFA competition this season. On the other hand, Fiorentina are also a very good team, and in my opinion, they are a better team and a more expensive team than Olympiacos are. But this season, and even in previous seasons, we have seen that Fiorentina, if they play good, they can be one of the best teams in the world. But if they don't perform good, then they will have a real trouble to score goals. And this is how we have seen them many times this season. And this is where these inconsistencies are coming from. So in my opinion, if Fiorentina want to win this game, they need to perform well for the whole 90 minutes. And truthfully, I just don't know if that's gonna happen. And for that reason, I actually think that Olympiacos will win this game 2-1, and they will be the champions of the Europa Conference League for the first time in their club's history. Obviously, this game is being played in Athens, so it is on home soil for Olympiacos, and for that reason, I don't think Fiorentina will come into this game as confident as Olympiacos will, and that's why I do think Olympiacos will win their first UEFA competition in their club's history. And that is the end of this video. That is my final prediction for the Europa Conference League, where I do think Olympiacos will beat Fiorentina. They will upset Fiorentina and win the final match 2-1 to win the Europa Conference League. If you guys agree with my prediction, let me know in the comments down below. But if you disagree and you think Fiorentina are going to win, again, let me know in the comments down below, and obviously I will be replying to every single comment. If you guys want to see my final prediction for the Champions League between Borussia Dortmund and Real Madrid, that video will be coming out in a few days. And obviously, if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.